Thank you for tuning in to this installment of the Federalist Files. On today's show, Joe Biden's climate denialism, more troubling evidence about the Wuhan lab, John Kerry rats out a longtime U.S. ally, Supreme Court to see a consequential Second Amendment case, new poll shows Joe Biden continuing to divide our country, and what happens when you have a state primarily ran by Democrats.
Since Donald Trump, it has completely become a tool of propaganda. We shouldn't even treat it like the press anymore. They have news in their title, which is to mock the name of news. We have to call them out when they do this because we see how incredibly destructive this is to democracy. There's no doubt Rupert Murdoch and Fox News are now a danger to democracy, and they should be treated that way. If they won't do it in the federal government challenging licenses or any way that they can do it through regulation, we have to keep doing it in the press. We have to keep pounding away at it and call them out the way they're being called out right now by this production.
So that man goes by the name of David Zurwick from the Baltimore Sun. You notice the call from media allies, and now we have the corporate media telling the government to crack down and take away licenses from other media sources that disagree with them, that disagree with their politics, instead of attempting to be more adequate, more efficient, better at their jobs, and do better ratings than Fox News, because as of right now, CNN has been tanking in the polls. So that is from CNN, reliable sources. So they did not have Brian Stelter on that weekend, I guess. So to make up for that, they had to have somebody else come on and call for Fox News' annihilation. And like I said, I'm not even a huge fan of Fox News, really. I think they're actually very moderate in terms of right-wing. I would say, I guess, moderate right. You see Tucker is a little bit more right, I think, than Hannity. I think Hannity actually really isn't that far right. He's kind of populist right. He's like Trumpian right. So, to begin with, I don't even think Trump was really that far right. I think people that were kind of running his show, the Kushners, his daughter, Ivanka Trump, I think they were much more populist, liberal, right, kind of. I don't really exactly know what their political affiliation was, but I don't think he was super far right conservative for the most part. So that is the media calling for the government to shut down the media, also known as the press, the First Amendment. So we have media. So if they're willing to do that, to big money, by the way, as well, then who's to say that they're not willing to shut you up? They're willing to shut up Murdoch, or whatever his name is, Ayers and Murdoch, the ones that founded Fox News, to shut that media outlet up. Why would they not be able to shut up you, your language, your religion, your ideology? And that's what they've been going for this entire time. It's very... If you're really watching and you're paying attention to these news cycles that are transpiring over time, it is very obvious what the game is that the media has been playing, what they're calling for, what some of these big tech organizations, some of these big corporations, what they're calling through their virtue signaling is. It is their endeavors, their goals is to achieve totalitarian power against you and be able to shut down any dissenting opinion and have it go your way. You will be pounded into submission by, they want the government to do it, and if it's not the government, they want the big organizations to do it, that is how they have been doing it thus far. They go through companies, corporations, they use it as an enforcement arm of the government to shut down dissent. If you say something that is against their views, you are then fired from your job. I was just recently watching, I think it was Chelsea Handler put up, or not Chelsea Handler, the other one, I can't even remember her name. The one that chopped Trump, did like a little stupid sketch of her beheading Trump. Kathy Griffin, that's her name, Kathy Griffin. She put up a video of a man that was laughing at another man that was wearing a dress, with really no context to the video, with nothing that happened beforehand. But she listed, she doxed the guy. She put his name out. She put his general location where he lives, the town, or the city rather. They didn't put his exact location, but this man has since then been fired from his job. So essentially, if you don't agree with the leftist ideology, the groupthink of the left, you will be fired for your job unless if you're somebody that, you own your own business, and then if that's the case, then you get sued, or no one comes to your place, or they burn it down. That's the way that they're doing things now. Everybody has a phone, so everybody in and of themselves is some sort of a media reporter, and there's enough of crazy mob mentality out there on the left that all you have to do is dox somebody and you get your house burned down, you get fired from your job, you get canceled. And that is the real cancel culture, when people on the left say there is no such thing as cancel culture. And the examples on the right, a lot of the times, the examples that we will use are people that are much more mainstream because it's relatable, but at the same time, mainstream people aren't as cancelable. For example, if they wanted to cancel a Sean Hannity or a Tucker Carlson, they can get them fired from their jobs, but at that point it doesn't really matter because they have accrued so much value and so much wealth and such a consumer base that it does not matter if they have been canceled. They will continue on successfully in what they do. So they're really uncancelable figures. Now, what we need to start pointing at from the right side of their perspective in terms of canceling, the cancel culture, is people like this man, regular working class people that are being canceled, being fired from their jobs, for holding a political ideology that does not comport with the left-wing ideology. So what I have, it's not a huge show. News really is not rolling in. Like I said, the news cycle over the weekend was a little bit slow. But I do have a little bit. I have some news. I have AOC on Earth Day talking about climate change. And then I have Joe Biden's climate, as I said, climate denialism. And it's not denialism of climate change. It's a denialism of how difficult it really will be to implement some of these government policies and the real cost of all of it. So play the clip of AOC on Earth Day. Play 5.
A lot of, frankly, fantastical stories about what we would do if we actually commit to saving our planet. We have heard that it is a socialist conspiracy takeover to bring down climate emissions below the IPCC report of 1.5 degrees Celsius. We have heard that it will cause electricity bills to skyrocket and prompt families to pay hundreds of dollars a month in their normal electricity bills. But that doesn't actually compare. While we see these statistics and these studies by Republican and conservative and pro-lobbyist think tanks develop these theoretical ideas of what nightmares could potentially await us if we actually stewarded our future.
So AOC goes through, and I think it's interesting that she goes statistics and studies. She says it with, the quote unquote idea, but she doesn't go on to state any of those statistics or studies. She talks about theoretical data. Yes, it has to be theoretical because we have not yet put it into place. There is no actual experimental data in the United States of implementing some of these super far left-wing clean energy-like policies that they've been talking about, these climate change or the Green New Deal-like policies. So yes, they have to be, in essence, they have to be considered theoretical because we've actually not implemented that in this country yet. We have attempted to do it in some ways in California. It is shown through the summers of last year that Gavin Newsom told everybody to actually not take. I think there's times when there's droughts, of course, over in California. They tell them not to take showers as often, and then now they're telling them we might have to be doing some rolling blackouts. That's what they were talking about last summer, telling them not to keep their AC on or only keep it on, at a certain time, and then you have to shut it off during the night or what have you, because they actually were having some major problems with their power grid because they have implemented these new clean energy like policies that, of course, they don't ever include nuclear energy because that's the cleanest and most efficient one of them all. The left will not implement those. That's not even an option. That one's straight off the table because of the because I guess the negative stigma that comes with nuclear energy. And then if you actually read into studies, it actually shows that it is very safe, much safer than it was years ago. But that's a debate for a whole other day. we've already tried this in California. It really has not worked well. And then in this exact same video, I mean, it's a little longer, she goes on to talk about Texas and how Texas has their own state power grid and how everything got all screwed up a couple months ago with it. And I've already I've debunked that theory. Electrical energy, or these windmills, this nuclear energy solar, not nuclear, solar energy, as well as this wind power, they yielded no power. They were inaccessible. First off, solar was inaccessible because of the snow was on the panels. They were frozen. So therefore, there was no sun coming down on those panels. They were not yielding any power because of that. The windmills were frozen. Those were not moving either. The only thing that actually worked during this crazy snow, like once in a 100-year occurrence in Texas, which is, by the way, that's not how policy should not be made for the once in 100-year time occurrence in the state of Texas. That's not the way things should work. If this is something that happens once every 100 years, we shouldn't make policy and implement rules and standards just for that one-time occurrence every single 100 years. It just does not make sense. It's kind of nonsensical. So we did not have any power derived from those two sources. The only sources that gave power were gas and oil. Natural gas, oil, as in gasoline. So it's erroneous. Her statements are erroneous. And the reason why she says these statistics and these studies is because she knows these have been brought up before, and she does not have anything to refute it or debunk it. Okay, so Joe Biden's climate denialism. I have a town hall piece, but written by David Harsanyi. He writes, President Joe Biden declared that the United States had a moral imperative to adopt an ambitious goal of cutting greenhouse gas emissions by 50% from 2005 levels by 2030 and 100% by 2050. Such an effort, if we were serious about it, would entail massive destruction of wealth, a surrender of our national trade advantages, the creation of a hugely intrusive state-run bureaucracy at home, the inhibition of free markets that have helped make the world a cleaner place, and a precipitous drop in the living standards of most citizens, especially the poor. This is very important to state. The idea of natural gas, gasoline, heat, AC, these have extended and bettered the conditions of the human being of living, especially in the lower class communities or the poorer class, the poorer among us. If you're going to force everybody to go to a clean energy alternative, yes, the rich will easily be able to pay for it. It is going to be much, much more expensive to yield the amount of power that is needed to fund our lifestyle. And that will not be done through clean energy at a cheap price. This is going to be extraordinarily expensive, and this will affect the lowest class among us. So he goes on. He says, of course it should be said that those who oppose the expansion of fracking and nuclear energy, most elected Democrats, it seems, aren't even remotely serious about tackling carbon emissions anyway. Around 80% of American energy is generated by fossil fuels and nuclear right now. Around 20% is generated by renewables, predominantly wind and hydropower, which is unavailable in most places. Only around 2% of our portfolio consists of inefficient and unreliable solar power, this even after decades of subsidies and mandates. When he means subsidies and mandates, the government is giving insane subsidies and mandates for electrical power. Electrical vehicles are not taxed. So if you want to go buy a Tesla, you just pay whatever the sticker price is. If it's 40 grand, that's it. 40 grand straight. No taxes on it. We have these subsidies and these mandates to help assimilate our society into going forward with a renewable energy resource. And we've seen that solar power, 2% of our power is derived from that. And then the other 20% is wind and hydropower. Problem is, not every single place is right next to some sort of body of water for hydropower. And in terms of this wind power, it sounds great, but what are you going to do? To begin with, the wind turbines are extremely loud, so those are really going to only be able to be used in an open field. In the suburban areas, it's not possible to implement a wind power. It's not possible to just build a bunch of giant windmills in the middle of some suburban area. So really, this almost seems like a unless if we go forward with nuclear energy, this seems like an unattainable goal. But we're going to go forward. To reach Biden's goal, the United States would need to envelop most of the nation in panels and windmills, and then rely on enormous Gaian prayer circles. So this is him being sarcastic. May she grant us sunshine and gale force winds. We would be compelled to eliminate most air travel in cars, making new ones produces lots of carbon emissions, and retrofit every home, factory, warehouse, and building in America to utilize this type of energy. We would need to dramatically cut back on our meat and dairy intake as well. So those are all the things that we would actually have to do. And interestingly enough, when they wrote this Green New Deal, I remember reading an article. I can't recall. I want to say it was a Wall Street Journal piece. The problem with the Wall Street Journal is I find a lot of very good articles. They always tell me I have to subscribe and pay, and I just don't have the money to subscribe and pay, so I don't do it. They have some very good authors over there that do great studies, statistics, and things of that nature. A lot of economy stuff as well. They're pretty left leaning in terms of socially, but when it comes to the economy, they do a pretty solid job. But I remember reading this article, and it said if we want to implement this Green New Deal and we want to retrofit every single home, we would have to be retrofitting 27 homes every single minute in the entire country, 27 homes a minute, if we want to reach what AOC wants retrofitting by, I think it was 2030. So pretty much this was an impossible, the Green New Deal she shot out there, she shot these expectations out there with no actual design, with no implementation or ideas behind it, no studies behind it. We had no engineers look into it and go, okay, so this is possible. There was no practicality behind her Green New Deal. So to go on, he states, affordable fossil fuels have done more to eliminate poverty than all the redistributionist programs ever concocted. By nearly every quantifiable measure, the environment is also in better shape now than it was 20, 30, or even 50 years ago. A lot of that is grounded by an economy that relies on affordable energy. Also, though every weather-related event is framed in a cataclysmic way, not that long ago being killed by the climate was serious concern for most people. Today it is incredibly rare. End quote. So he's going on to state, yes, years ago, people died from freezing to death or the cold. Winters were always very rough because there was no crops. You had to grow all your crops in the spring and the summer, fall. And then you had to store them for the winter and hope that you made it through the winter. The living conditions were just terrible. Average life expectancy was around 40, 50 years. And this wasn't that long ago. This is maybe 300 years ago, 200, 300 years ago, when there's no such thing as AC or heat. And it was considered normal to die from climate, really. And additionally, these fossil fuels are the most affordable thing we have because we live in an innovative environment. If you look at, gas prices now have raised a little bit, but just in a general sense, a gallon of gas, if you really actually think about the amount of power that it produces, in 1 gallon of gas, you're paying, let's say, $2 a gallon. I think right now in Jersey, it's around like $2.70. Let's say you're paying $2 just to round it off easily. Pay $2 for a gallon of gas. And you can, with a gallon of gas, if you're driving a decently efficient car, you can get 30 miles out of that. Just thinking about the efficiency and the power yield from gasoline is extraordinary. And this is being used, and this helps. There's nothing that is done more to pull people out of or eliminate the poverty differences, than any redistributionist program has done. So if you look at all, and I was just thinking about this, I have some friends that went to Austin, and they were telling me about it. They said there's homeless there, and people think of Texas as this super red state, where it's not really, it's turning pretty blue in these big cities over there. In Austin specifically, because you have a lot of people from California moving to Austin and turning it extremely liberal. And they're saying, I'm surprised there was so much homeless there. At the end of the day, if you notice where the homeless are, it's always where the far left is. The far left always talks about redistributionist programs, helping the poor, the war on poverty. It has not worked. It has not worked since the 90s when Rush Limbaugh was talking about it. When they say this is how much money we're going to put into helping the poor, the war on poverty, and poverty has not decreased at all. It's been the same, if not more, from that time. And they say, if we don't stop this, this is what's going to happen. No, everything pretty much stays the same. It gets worse, especially in your liberal city areas, because your redistributionist programs are terrible and they don't help anybody. You guys leave a bunch of people. You let a bunch of people slip through the cracks over in your liberal cities. And I just think it's always interesting to think that it's always these big left-leaning cities that have this problem. So it goes on. To end here, he states, what does that burden look like? After shutting down a large chunk of its economy in 2020 and spending trillions to keep those affected afloat and avert a depression, the United States emissions only fell by 13%. Imagine what 50% might entail. When confronted with these nagging specifics, we often hear how these are aspirational goals. Why would we aspire to make life worse for billions of people? End quote. So more importantly, this would make life worse. When he says billions of people, I guess he means in other countries as well. I mean, in this country specifically, we have 330 million people. This would be a cataclysmic disaster for the poorest among us. They would take the major hit here. People that want to live in comfort and some sort of luxury, people that have a decent amount of money, upper middle class, upper class, they would be okay. Middle class would really struggle with this because to afford to pay bills on top of the insane energy bill that they would have every single month would be almost nearly impossible. It would put a stranglehold on their bank account, make their life much more difficult. When you look into what families fight about the most, or husband, wife, what they fight about the most, the studies, it's always like top 3 is always money. So he says in this entire time, this 2020, we had, and I'm on the road, my job, and specifically I work in the, I guess, industry. I don't really know what to call it, retail, not really real retail. I was on the road every single day pretty much in 2020 during the COVID, in the very beginning of this COVID scare. It was months, and I would not see anybody on the road. I think there was some sort of a state of emergency in New Jersey. People were just not on the road. People wouldn't drive to work. They were all working from home. And then a lot of people were sitting at home collecting paycheck like they're still doing currently. But I did not see a lot of people on the road. So you're telling me after all of this, emissions only fell by 13%, and you guys want a 50% emission drop? How are we going to do? No one was even driving on the road for a good half of the year. So that tells me then that our emissions mostly, and for the most part, folks, I think the number is something like 80% of emissions are caused by freightliners, by giant boats, because the amount of power that it takes due to the water, the density in water is much higher than the density in, air on the regular ground, and gravity is different with the water. So it actually, and the amount of weight that's on a freightliner to power a giant freightliner ship, to move in the water miles and miles, it's an insane amount of oil. So the emissions that come from those freightliners, as well as from airplanes as well, that's where a huge, like I said, 80%, I'm pretty sure that's the number. It's like, that's where 80% of our fuel is going. So we would have to somehow figure that problem out more than anything. And that is almost impractical. I can't think of any way to fix it other than going forward with solar or rather nuclear power, just because the yield is high enough. But I'm not an engineer. I don't know enough about that. So next story I have, scientists at Wuhan lab helped Chinese army in secret project to find animal viruses. So we have more news kind of coming out of this weird virology lab over in Wuhan, China. And this is a Daily Mail piece. It's written by Ian Burrell. So it states, scientists studying bat diseases at China's maximum security laboratory in Wuhan were engaged in a massive project to investigate animal viruses alongside leading military officials, despite their denials of any such links. Documents obtained by the Daily Mail on Sunday reveal that a nationwide scheme directed by a leading state body was launched 9 years ago to discover new viruses and detect the dark matter of biology involved in spreading diseases. So this is a maximum security laboratory they have. Now we're learning that the military officials in China were kind of leading this operation, this massive project to investigate and look into biology that is involved in spreading diseases. So it goes on. The documents obtained by the mail on Sunday detail a major project called the Discovery of Animal-Delivered Pathogens Carried by Wild Animals, which set out to find organisms that could infect humans and investigate their evolution. It was launched in 2012 and funded by the National Natural Science Foundation of China. The project was led by Zhu Jingzhao, who boasted at a conference in 2019 that a giant network of infectious disease prevention and control is taking shape. The professor also headed the first expert group investigating COVID's emergence in Wuhan. He denied human transmission initially, despite evidence from hospitals, then insisted in mid-January this epidemic is limited and will end if there are no new cases next week. One review of his virus hunting project admitted a large number of new viruses have been discovered, causing great concern in the international virology community. So we have this, I'm trying to find the exact name. It was led by Zhu Jingzhao. It's hard to say the name. And this is them talking about, how great their network is, all this other stuff. And then, according to the Daily Mail piece, what they have is they're saying this epidemic, and this transmission was found out in mid-January, I guess, or in mid-January. I think I had some other paperwork months ago that I reported on this. It was found earliest was in December when they were having the government meetings about this, and they were talking about it specifically. Now, he said by mid-January, in the middle of January, he said that this epidemic's limited, it's going to end next week, whatever. Obviously, it didn't. It continued. So it goes on. And this is funny how I have reported on this so many times, and this is such a non-story somehow. And I've gotten legitimate government from China documents that I've reported on before. And it seems like it's not a problem. And it also seems like from the right doesn't really look into it, but they just say, yeah, I'm sure it came from China. And the left just thinks that anyone that from the right that says that is like a conspiracy nut. So to go on. An update in 2018 said that the scientific teams who published many of their findings in international journals have found 4 new pathogens and 10 new bacteria, while more than 1,640 new viruses were discovered using metagenomics technology. Such research is based on extraction of genetic material from samples such as those collected by Professor Shi from bat feces and blood in the cave networks of southern China. Such extensive sampling led to Professor Shi's rapid revelation last year of, they call it RATG13, the closest known relative to the new strain of coronavirus that causes COVID. It was stored at the Wuhan lab, the biggest repository of bat coronaviruses in Asia. So, they've had these studies. In 2018, they had 1,640 new viruses that they found through this insane technology, metagenomic technology. And this was all in studying bats. And then they have this sampling, RATG13, that is a close relative or a strain of coronavirus. And then from there, this caused COVID. And this could have mutated into something totally different that was that was exacerbated and much more contagious and powerful, almost like they would, I guess, call like a super virus or something of that nature. So it goes on. It later emerged she changed its name from another virus identified in a previous paper, thus obscuring its link to the 3 miners who died from a strange respiratory disease they caught clearing bat droppings. Professor Shi also admitted that 8 more unidentified SARS viruses had been collected in the mine. The institute took its database of virus samples offline in September 2019, just a few weeks before COVID cases exploded in Wuhan. A comment was made on social media after Colonel Zhao published a paper on a fatal tick bite, saying he and Professor Shi can always find a virus that has never been found in humans, adding, "I suspect this is another so-called scientific research made in the laboratory." In recent years, China's military has ramped up its hiring of scientists since President Xi Jinping said this was a key element in the nation's march for global supremacy. Ling Chaohan, a dissident who used to work for the Chinese government, said Zhao's involvement raises suspicions that military researchers who are experts in coronaviruses might also be involved in the biodefense operations. So to kind of sum everything up here, you have this colonel that is he's involved, deeply involved with this research, as they're going to use it as a biological sense of warfare or a biological weapon. And then you have Professor Shi, who was changing and messing around with the research data to try to cover up these 3 miners that died and passed away from a strange respiratory disease. And then Jinping outwardly is just saying, this is a key element to our nation's march for global supremacy, so we can pretty much step on the opposition as in America, we're coming for you. I mean, this revelation it's insane. It's absolutely insane. And the media has yet to really report much on this. They'll sit there and they'll talk about COVID deaths. They'll talk about how great of a job Biden is doing in getting people vaccinated and how everyone needs to get their vaccination and how deadly this coronavirus is, but they will not report the origination of it or any of the details behind it, or if the United States government, with the HHS, gave them a grant in this Wuhan lab to do this research. So next story I have, this is a pretty big story here. Supreme Court to hear a huge Second Amendment case. It's a Fox News piece written by Ron Blitzer. So it states, the Supreme Court announces Monday that it will hear a major gun rights case over whether ordinary citizens can be legally prohibited from carrying concealed handguns for self-defense outside their homes. The case brought by the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association challenges a New York law that prohibits citizens from carrying a gun outside their home without a license that the state makes difficult to obtain. Okay, so I can actually kind of put this in a better light because I'm from New Jersey and we have almost the same policy here, but we actually have it statewide. In New York, I think they only specifically have it in the city of New York. I don't know if they specifically have it in the state. They may. So in New Jersey, there's the idea of a may issue and a shall issue concealed carry permit. In New Jersey, it's a may issue state, as in, the government, with their discretion, can decide whether or not you should have the right to concealed carry. That is simply what it is. It somewhat has to do with meeting qualifications, but it really doesn't. So me personally, I have never committed a felony, never committed a crime, never committed misdemeanor, never. Maybe I had one speeding ticket maybe 5 years ago. I am very clean. Okay, if I went and I tried to get myself a concealed carry permit right now at this moment, and I did all the paperwork, I met all the qualifications that are supposed to be laid out, like, hey, are you a felon? Do you use drugs? Also, that's another additional thing. I have never done a drug in my entire life. I've never done an illegal drug. I have drank alcohol. That's legal under the law. I've not done anything. Okay, and that is 100% truthful. I would go on a polygraph for that, whether the polygraph comes through or not. So, I'm pretty clean across the board, pretty clean. So I have, if I went for this concealed carry permit in New Jersey, it's a may issue state. So they just turn me down blatantly because they feel like it. And that's considered by the law in the state of New Jersey, that is considered justified. They have the power to do so. Now, New York must hold this same, or whether it's the city or it's the state, must hold this same law. Okay? Now, if you live in, let's say, Missouri, and you want to conceal, or let's say just Tennessee. Tennessee, I think they're not even doing concealed carry permits. I think they just passed a law that you don't have to go get a permit. If you can legally obtain the firearm, then that's it. They don't care. But in other states, they have this idea. In California, I'll actually use in particular. California, there's big lib cities. They don't allow you to get one. It's the whole May issue over there. And then in some parts of California, the more red parts of California's huge. if you go to get a concealed carry permit, you reach all the qualifications, it is a shall issue. As in, they shall not deny you of the concealed carry permit. As in, you get that concealed carry permit, and now you are identified by the government as able to conceal carry. So in this case, in New York, they have this may issue, and they decide not to issue to somebody. The person sues. They go, I guess, up all the way up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court's going to take this case. So they're going to rule on whether a state has the right and the power to deny you a concealed carry permit. And if they, and we have Alito, we have Thomas, we have Gorsuch, we have Coney Barrett, whatever her name is, Kavanaugh, and then you got John Roberts. That's supposed to be like the conservatives, really. John Roberts isn't really that conservative. From what we've seen from Amy Coney Barrett, she's not really that conservative either. And then we also see from Kavanaugh, he's not really that conservative either. So this one's interesting. This one can kind of go either way here, just depending on how Barrett and Kavanaugh vote, and as well as John Roberts. I just cannot see how they can justify in this Supreme Court case that you do not have a right, because this comes down to allowing law-abiding citizens the inherent right of self-preservation. That is all that this is. This is simply put, that is what this case is all about. So I just do not know how they're going to justify, other than looking at the 10th Amendment and saying, well, the states have their rights. They have the right to kind of make their own laws, but the state cannot make any laws that abridge the Constitution, abridge the Second Amendment. So how is the 10th Amendment really justifying that? I know all the liberals on the court. I think the guy's name's Breyer. Trying to think of the other names. Sotomayor. There's one other. I can't remember them off the top of my head now. You know, all of them are going to obviously find any justification they can to take away your rights from you. But it's just interesting to see the way in which this case is going to play out. And this could be a huge, monumental case in favor of Second Amendment concealed carry. Whether you want to implement permits, as long as you reach the qualification, then you can conceal carry. But in New Jersey currently, unless if you are a law enforcement, former law enforcement, I guess maybe armed security or an armed guard, that is the only way you can obtain a concealed carry in this state particularly. So to go on, the court says, and I quote, "The petition for a writ of certiorari is granted limited to the following question: whether the state's denial of partitioners' applications for concealed carry licenses for self-defense violated the Second Amendment." So that's specifically what they will be looking over. "The state requires license applicants to show that proper cause exists for a person to have one. The Second Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in August that the law is constitutional. New York is among 8 states that limit who has the right to carry a weapon in public. The others are California, Delaware, Hawaii, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, and Rhode Island." So we have a couple of and notice they're all blue states. We have a couple of blue states that don't allow for this. So what you really need is you need some sort of proper cause that exists to obtain a concealed carry permit in these states, and really they're not giving you one in the state of New Jersey, unless if my job that I have always puts me in very dangerous scenarios. And guess what? When the state decides to deny you, or the government, the big nanny state, when they decide to deny you of your Second Amendment right, in this case, and then when you go out and something happens to you, you get caught in a crowd, you get caught in a church, and somebody decides to open fire in that church, and you're one person that dies, guess what happens? Your family can't sue the government. If I go and I apply for my concealed carry permit, I get turned down by the state government here. I go to a church, decide some psycho shows up, he wants to shoot up the entire church, I'm shot and killed in the action, can't sue the government. Too bad. It's on you. It's on you. So you don't have the right to protect yourself. You have no right to self-preservation. And then additionally, you call the cops now, since we're defunding the police. The cops aren't going to show up to help you either. So you really have no answer, folks. Good luck, essentially. That's what the government's telling you. The government is telling you, we don't care about your life. Your life is meaningless to us. You're just a number. That is it. You have no right for self-preservation. You don't have the right to defend yourself or your family. You don't have the right to carry out your responsibilities to defend and protect your family. That is simply put the way in which these governments, these state governments, in these big blue Democrat-ran states, that's what they think of you, that you're not worth it. But guess what? You're worth it when they want to tax you 7% of your income. Then you're worth it to them. But you're not worth it when it comes to self-preservation. So next story I have, John Kerry. John Kerry is in bed with Iran. New York Post piece, and that is the way that I title. I don't remember the actual. Here. Look, Iran foreign minister says John Kerry met with him during the Trump years. It's written by Mark Moore. So to begin with, you have this Iran's foreign minister claimed in a leaked recording that former U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry told him about over 200 covert Israeli attacks on Iranian interests in Syria during former President Donald Trump's administration. Foreign Minister Javad Zarif said in the leaked recording obtained by the New York Times and Iran International that the Revolutionary Guard Corps and the country's supreme leaders kept him in the dark about government negotiations and military operations, and that he was receiving intel from John Kerry. He said, and I quote, "It was former U.S. Foreign Secretary John Kerry who told me Israel had launched more than 200 attacks on Iranian forces in Syria," end quote. So what happened here is you had John Kerry going and ratting on one of our biggest allies in the United States and Israel, saying, "Oh, just so you know, Israel has conducted 200 covert operations, covert attacks on Iranian interests in Syria. They have these troops or whatever, and this is what they're doing. They're covert black ops troops. This is what they're doing." And you ask the question of, why is it that John Kerry actually has the power to do, how does he have this intel? And you say, okay, well, you know what happens when you get this top secret confidential, when you get that clearance, or you know somebody with that clearance, you are entitled to this information, because usually they do not log you off of the system, unfortunately. The way it should work is, as soon as you're out of government, you have no right, you have no clearance, you get kicked out, see you later, you have no right to that information. He was obtaining this information and he was passing it on, and this is while he was not in the U.S. government. He did not work in the U.S. government. He was not considered a U.S. diplomat. There was nothing that he did having to do with, other than being a citizen, there's nothing having to do with the United States. He was not a representative of the United States. So he is in direct violation of the Logan Act, the same thing that they went after Michael Flynn on. And the Logan Act, no one's actually ever been prosecuted of it except for Michael Flynn. Michael Flynn is the only person that has ever been actually brought up on the charges of a Logan Act violation. It's this weird law they made, and they made it for U.S. citizens so they didn't go and talk to foreign governments to try to overthrow the U.S. government. So this act, it passed in following George Logan's unauthorized negotiations with France in 1798, and was signed into law by John Adams. And John Adams, I think, was like our second president, so it was a very, very, I mean, this is old school. And then this... they've never actually... Only 2 people have ever been indicted on charges for violating the act. Neither one of them was ever convicted, so they were brought up on charges. So this is pretty much unprecedented what they did to Mike Flynn, and this is exactly what John Kerry was doing during the Trump administration the entire time. And it wasn't a problem. It's now not going to be a problem. The media is going to go and they're going to take this story, they're going to sweep it under the rug, as they always do. And it is really, it's reprehensible from what the media does, and the way in which they characterize both administrations. We really have not heard much negativity in reference to Joe Biden and the way in which the economy has been running. I mean, recently he just came out last week and pretty much tanked the market by making a couple comments, a couple statements. The market's really not fully recovered from what they said. And additionally, a lot of these, economics-wise, a lot of these laws have not been passed. But imagine if they had been, and they've been pushing for these high taxes, just job-killing, American job-killing legislation is what he's been pushing for this entire time. And additionally, if you want to hear what, and this is the part of the show where you understand, this is where it gets to, where you understand what Democrat rule really looks like. So I have this, it's a small piece out of Illinois. It's a Forbes article, surprisingly enough. Illinois, 122,000 public employees in the state of Illinois were paid $100,000 plus a year, and it cost taxpayers $15.8 billion in the state of Illinois. It's outrageous. So you had barbers, and just a couple of examples. This is an insane story, and this is what happens because Illinois is one of our bluest, probably easily top 5 bluest states in the entire union. I'd probably say maybe California, New Jersey, New York, and then you probably have Illinois right after that. So Illinois, you had barbers at state correction facilities making $115,000 a year. Now you had janitors at the State Toll Highway Authority cleaned up $123,000 a year on average. So you had people that were janitors making $123,000 a year. You had people that were barbers making $115,000 per year. Bus drivers in Chicago made $174,000 a year. Line workers on the Chicago Transit Authority earned $222,000. Community college presidents, which is funded by taxpayers. These are all taxpayer-funded positions. You had community college presidents making $418,000. University doctors earned up to $2 million, and 171 small-town managers out-earned the Illinois governor. They made $181,000 a year. This is insane. So this is what happens when you get a Democrat government. You get a full-fledged insane amount of property taxes, income taxes, state sales tax. We have very similar things going on in New Jersey. I'm sure that we would have numbers that are very comparative to these Illinois numbers that we're seeing right now. So public schools, 40,000 they have public schools in the state of Illinois. Last year, nearly 24,500 educators earned a 6-figure salary, while more than 15,500 retirees received 6-figure pensions. So you had people on their pensions making $100,000 a year as teachers. And then you also have educators, teachers themselves, while they're still working, making $100,000 or more. Most Illinois schools were not back to full-time in-person instruction as of March 2021. So March 2021, they weren't even full-time. So for a full year, they shut down their entire school system while everybody got paid $100,000 plus, or a bunch of educators got paid $100,000 plus. So 16 retired school superintendents pocketed $300,000 plus in retirement pensions. This is retirement pensions. This isn't, you're not working. You are sitting at home. Usually the way pensions work, depending on what state you live in, it's a percentage. A lot of the time, sometimes it's dependent on years worked or paid into the pension system. So you have, and this is the problem. This is the problem with public sector unions. They negotiate these insane deals, and you ask, who is it from the state, or who is it from the town or the municipality that is negotiating these insane contracts? The taxpayer, why are we negotiating contracts? This is taxpayer dollars. It's easier to negotiate contracts when it's not your money to negotiate with a union. And that's why this idea of public sector employees being unionized is a serious problem, and it causes a huge welfare state on people that are private employees. The amount of taxation at this point is easily theft. And it does warrant some sort of a retribution to the people. So 16 retired. Okay, I said that one. So what else do we get? Oh, and then it goes on to name how much every single individual one made. It's insane. And then we have Chicago in particular. You have 25,000 of, I guess these schools are in Chicago. We calculated that the city paid $737 million in extra pay. We're talking overtime, vacation, supplemental, and then one of them says fitness, which to me doesn't make any sense. Above base salary, so people are making insane amounts of overtime. The Chicago Police and Fire Department paid nearly 1,000 employees between $200,000 and $430,000 in cash compensation last year, and that's just Chicago itself. The Chicago Transit Authority, operator of mass transit in the city, included the L train, paid rail service supervisors up to $239,000, iron workers as much as $225,000, and line workers collected $222,000. A signal maintainer took home $191,000. A telephone line worker was paid $190,000, and this one's insane. A customer service representative made $185,000. So we have we have no accountability coming from these liberal states, these liberal cities. This is what a welfare system looks like when everyone always said, get a government job. Government jobs are so great. This is the quintessential example of the idea that government jobs are so great and they're so great for everybody. These create jobs. The government does not create jobs. It is a net loser. The government, what they did is they confiscated money from the people of Illinois, and in particular, the citizens in Chicago. They confiscated their money from them at the end of a gun, and then they redistributed it to these people. So they took it from other people unwillingly, and they redistributed it to people at astronomical rates. And that is what you get when you have these blue states. This is the implementation you have. And this is always, what's funny? This is what the idea of communism, socialism is. You notice the people that work for the state, and this was the same in ancient Rome, people that worked for the state, or the gladiators, or the warriors on the side of Caesar, always got treated very well. And that's the point of this whole communist system. If you're in with the government, if you're in bed with the government, you work for the state, your life is very good. You're of the aristocracy, the oligarchy, you're of the connected few. And you live a very nice lifestyle, a very, not rather fulfilling lifestyle, but very comfortable. And everyone else works for you. And that's the way communism works. That's the way socialism works. Socialism becomes communism, in essence. That's really what the problem is. And this is what our Democrats push. So it's hard for me to sit here and call them really Democrats, because in my view, the way I look at them, I see them as cultural Marxists and communists, because every single policy that they go forward with and they try to attempt to implement is to confiscate your rights, confiscate your money, take away your freedom and liberty from you, and then redistribute your money to other people and make your life as miserable as they can. So to go on, I have this piece, this Juan Williams on Fox News once again. I always feel the need to show the idiocy of the left wing. This is him shilling for President Biden, play 7.
I think you have to make a distinction here, Chris, between Republicans in Congress and Republican voters. If you look at the COVID relief plan, Republican voters support it in polls. If you look at infrastructure spending, right now for the lion's share of that, Republicans support it. If you look at immigration reform, Republicans support it. They want it to happen. So even as Republican voters support much of President Biden's plan, he has unified voters across political lines. But what he has not unified has been Republicans in Congress. They have reverted to the...
So this is another example of the left just making things up. In this case, Juan Williams, I don't know where he got this study from. He says, okay, the bipartisanship is really the problem. We have Republicans that actually like the job that Joe Biden's doing right now. I don't really know if that's the case. I'm on the right wing. I think he's doing a terrible job thus far. And the administration, I don't really even want to say him, because I know that there's somebody behind him working him this whole time, his handlers, rather. So I got this Breitbart study because obviously this is categorically incorrect. That's why he doesn't cite his study. He just makes a general statement in a phrase, as the left decides to do, with no type of statistical analysis, as AOC would say, because that is antithetical to them. They just make statements, they conject, and they expect you, the ignorant voter, to listen to them. And that is their method. That is their method of operation, really. So 82% of the country, or 82% think the country is divided. This is a NBC News poll. So we have a vast majority of U.S. adults still believe the country is divided, despite what President Joe Biden vows to be more unifying as a president. So a poll released on the cusp of Biden's first 100 days in office revealed just more than a third, or 36%, say the country is headed in the right direction. Meanwhile, the vast majority of respondents, 82%, believe the country is divided. So you have 82% of the country saying, yeah, we're still divided. So Biden's term began with a second divisive impeachment effort against former President Trump. All the while, he has seemingly continued to support cancel culture as members of the far left continue to fan the flames of racial division. More recently, Biden failed to demonstrate unity after slamming states, particularly Georgia, for pursuing basic election integrity laws, calling them, quote-unquote, un-American and, quote-unquote, sick, and likening them to Jim Crow era. So this is a study from April 17th to the 20th among 1,000 adults, has a margin of error plus or minus 3.1%. So this is an NBC poll. So NBC isn't like a super, right-wing source. It's generally much more left-leaning, maybe more middle-leaning, but definitely more left-leaning for sure. And this is what the left commonly does, the common theme now. They'll grade things as, okay, well, this is existential threat, our climate, or they'll claim things like, the Second Amendment, you're killing children by owning a gun. They use the most exaggerated, hyperbolic phrases that they can. So this idea, this voting integrity law that has been passed in Georgia, he says it's Jim Crow era-like stuff. Just in a general statement, general phrase. What he won't do, and what the liberals won't do, they won't look through the law and state specific examples that are tantamount to Jim Crow because they know it's not true. They just say things like this. They are playing you. If you're a liberal and you listen, and maybe you listen because you're angry and you want to message me angrily, or you want to build up dirt, maybe you're doing the whole media matters thing and you're listening to me so then you can post it online somewhere and really, stick it to me and take me out of context. You're being played. You're being scammed in this system. This is a farce. The Democrat Party, and even the Republican Party in some ways, not all the time. Democrat Party almost all the time. They're scamming you, folks. You're being scammed. You're being joked. So what I have is this shows when Joe Biden says, he makes his big statement, yeah, we're unifying the country, and this is the big thing from the Democrats. They would say, well, we're the working class party. Years ago, you guys might have been the working class party. Not anymore. That has slowly been moving to the other side. There's been a paradigm shift where the right is kind of bleeding like the rich, elitist, smug a-holes, and they're all going and voting on the left side to save themselves because they're worried about the woke mob coming to burn down their house next. And then you have all the working class people that were on the left side starting to shift to the right. And you say, where exactly do you get this? Where do you get this information from? So I have another Breitbart piece. This is an NBC News survey, once again, from February, reaffirming that working and lower middle class Americans are Republicans thanks to the former President Donald Trump returning to the party, its economic nationalist roots with labor protections, reductions to foreign competition, and a non-interventionalist foreign policy. So between 2010 and 2020, and I think this is partially as well an indictment on the Obama administration, how terribly he did as a leader in unifying the country, which he did not do. He made us more divided, and then you get Trump in there, and then the left just goes, bonkers, and they make it much more divided than ever before. If you actually listen to Trump and his rhetoric, as the left calls it, he doesn't single out any specific group and say they're terrible people, or I hope you don't vote. I mean, Trump generally just goes after elitists and other politicians on the Democrat Party. His thing is he goes after Democrat politicians, but he doesn't go after Democrat voters, if you notice. He's never going after Democrat voters. Because he knows that's a constituency is one thing, and he knows that they're regular working class people just like everybody else. Well, for the most part. He generally goes after the far left psychos, the crazies, the elitist, smug liberals in the media class, as well as Democrat politicians. But he does not go after the constituency of the Democrat Party. You will not be able to find a clip of that. If you do find a clip of that, it is an edited, out-of-context clip that can easily be explained by anyone that has listened to the full clip. So this NBA News survey shown between 2010 and 2020. So you had the Obama administration, and then you had the Trump administration right shortly thereafter. During this time period, the Republican Party has gained 12 percentage points with working class Americans, while Democrats have lost 8 percentage points with working class Americans. White Americans in blue collar jobs who now vote for the GOP jumped from 45% in 2010 to 57% in 2020, and blue collar Hispanic support has gone from 23% to 36%, so that's another 13% increase from 2010 to 2020. Working class black Americans as well have increased, supported Republicans over the last decade. Reductions to overall immigration and less foreign competition in the U.S. labor market are widely popular policy proposals across party lines and racial lines. So the idea implemented by Trump, his ideology, his idea was, we're going to close down the borders because we know that there is a supply and demand in the marketplace in terms of the labor market. And this wins over blue-collar workers because they know their competition is coming illegally here to this country. So that ideology, that implementation by Trump is what has won a lot of voters over. I also think it's a referendum on how terrible the job Barack Obama did on our recovering economy. So the latest Rasmussen poll, or Rasmussen Report survey, of 1,250 likely U.S. voters shows that nearly 7 in 10 support mandatory E-Verify, about 71% support reducing legal immigration levels, 64% oppose the process known as chain migration, whereby legal immigrants can bring an unlimited number of foreign relatives to the U.S., 65% say it is better for business to recruit Americans than hire foreign workers, and 6 in 10 say the U.S. has enough talent for business to hire from. So we have, around 60 to 70% of the country believe in actually shutting down not only, we're talking legal immigration, we're not even talking about illegal immigration, because they're worried for their jobs, because we know now that we have a lot of these countries that are taking our jobs, and they're shipping, or a lot of these corporations that are shipping our jobs to other countries. They're taking our jobs and they're sending them somewhere else. We have a heavy support of this, and this is what people liked about Donald Trump. This is why people in the working blue-collar class, the working class person, is moving over and shifting over to the Republican Party. So that is why, to me, the Democrats are just so deeply, and this is coming from a guy where, my grandfather was a Democrat, he was a working class, he was a garbage man. My father was a Democrat. He recently switched over. There's a lot of people in my family that were Democrats. My father and my mother, both of them. My mother actually still is technically registered as a Democrat, but doesn't really. I don't know how she votes. She votes generally Republican. But we have a lot of people. This is a thing that's common. This is a common theme now that is happening, where people were, Democrat Party's for the working class. Democrat Party is no longer for the working class. People are going to start moving and shifting their way to the Republican Party. I think there's a lot of influencers as well as in the on the right, politically right leaning, that are moving people such as Candace Owens, I guess Ben Shapiro, Steven Crowder, other people of that nature, but Dan Bongino as well. So I actually don't think, even though I'm sitting here and as always, there's always negative spectrum to the show because there's negative things happening in the current administration. I think that this will come as a referendum on the current administration in the midterms and in the main election. I think that people will go and they will show up in droves to vote away this socialist ideology, this job killing policies that are attempting to be implemented, and as well as the big gun grab. I think there's a lot of I think a Second Amendment. I really do. I think that Second Amendment is a winning case on the right. I think that the left has lost bounds with their people, especially after this year, especially after the rioting and looting in these big cities. I think the right has this one won. I think the Second Amendment case is easily won. I really do. I think that a lot of people, even people on the left, believe in the Second Amendment because of what they saw in these big cities, what they see in their regular life, and they know viral videos. They know that their life can be in danger very quickly out of nowhere from a random person that they don't even know. So what I have, a quick couple of headlines, and I'm running a little bit late today. Marcellus Wiley clip, him talking about LeBron James specifically. It was about a 6.5 minute clip. I cut it down into a shorter segment. Play 2.
America's divided. I just think we're different. And right now, it's getting highlighted more so than ever, so it's getting exaggerated. LeBron says he's scared to leave his house. Why? What? I'm not scared to leave my house, and I'm not LeBron James. I'm not enamored like LeBron James. He's scared to leave his house? We could have that conversation another day. LeBron James, in this tweet, what does he say? Oh, man, the system. The system. The same system that is so broken it allowed you to become a billionaire and never get arrested in it. But the system is broken. Are you speaking for other people? We have enough people out here telling us what not to do, what goes wrong. How about somebody who has made it? Single parent. LeBron James, he went to 10 different homes, moving around Ohio his entire childhood. I would love to hear that story of how you became LeBron James against all odds, instead of always professing the odds are against all people.
Marcellus Wiley is very interesting, and he went in to talk about BLM at one time a couple months ago. He was saying he's not a fan of it because it destroys the nuclear family, the organization, not the statement, not the phrase. The organization goes to destroy the nuclear family, and then he put it back in retrospect to his own life. He related it, well, my father and my mother were always around, and I had a lot of friends growing up that didn't have their father in the household, and they ended up getting into the wrong things. They were doing gang activity, they got locked up, they got incarcerated. Whereas with me, I stayed on the straight and narrow. I'm pretty sure he has like a degree from an Ivy League school. He's pretty intelligent, and on the issues, I think he really generally has an idea of what he's talking about. He has a very good perspective, I'd like to say. A reasonable, practical perspective. He said many times during this segment, he's a huge fan of LeBron James. But he says what he's doing here, what he's saying is he's telling kids, and to begin with, when he says, oh, I'm afraid to leave my house, he knows it's BS. He knows it's not true. He calls BS on it because he's right. It is. It's BS. You have armed security. You have cops around you at all times. What do you mean you're afraid to leave your house? That's another thing. He walks around LeBron James with cops around him a lot of the time, and then he makes it like the cops are going to kill him all the time. It's very disingenuous. And additionally, he says, you're telling, and this is what I stated last show, you're telling a bunch of kids that grew up in same scenarios as you did, the same situation, very similar situation. You're telling them that they cannot succeed. Meanwhile, you have succeeded. You're worth probably billions of dollars at this point. You're very successful. And once again, what Marcel said before this, he said, and LeBron's somebody that has done so much for those communities. So it really does not make sense. And here's another perspective that I hold myself. Why wouldn't you hold some sort of educational course, or why wouldn't you try to talk with police, do some sort of reach out from LeBron's perspective, some sort of community group, or talk to some of these kids, these young cats, start some sort of a fund, let's say, for legal support, and teach some of these young kids, hey, listen, when the cops are going to arrest you, do whatever, you comply with the police, and you will fight it in court another day if you do not have money. We have set up this legal support defense fund, and with that defense fund, that's what we'll use to help you in court pay those fees. Why is it that that's not the community outreach? The outreach is, and you know why it is, folks? It is so much easier to just get on Twitter and just post an opinion and hit send than do any of that extra work. And he's in a position, and I'm not sitting here I'm not the left. I don't call for people to do things with their money, but he's in a position where if you really want to implement some sort of change and you want to start a net good and really speak to this issue and make a difference, that's probably what you should do. You shouldn't just post something and tell kids that they can't make it and they're bound pretty much to get killed at the hands of police as soon as they walk outside their house, especially considering it's not true. And that kind of, those ideas, that ideology, that should just be repudiated because statistically it's just not true. And that's generally what the left goes for, things that statistically are not true. Anecdotally may be true for certain people and specifically, but with no specifics behind it. So a couple quick headlines, like I said before. Houston Hospital will dismiss employees who deny COVID-19 vaccine. I don't really know if they can specifically do that. That may get to a court case, but that is theblaze.com. Elizabeth Warren speaks up for Capitol rioters. Epic Times piece. Very interestingly enough, you had Elizabeth Warren, and I don't remember the other Democrat that spoke up, which surprisingly stood up for the rights of right-wing actors Capitol rioters, they were leaving them in 23 hours of solitary confinement, and they have not even yet been indicted or rather charged. There's not been a guilty verdict yet for them for what they did, and they're being left 23 hours a day in solitary confinement, and she's speaking out on that. I'm sure that there's going to be some sort of case against them as well. I would highly suggest them to lawyer up. Officially, enough signatures, and this is the very last one here, officially enough signatures have been signed to oust Gavin Newsom. I think it's something like 1.6 million they need in the state of California, which really, if you think about it, is not that much considering how high their population is. Yeah, it's 1.6 valid signatures backing or getting rid of the campaign, or backing the campaign of getting rid of Gavin Newsom as the governor. So next there'll be a referendum. There will be a vote in this next election to recall Gavin Newsom, which is just hilarious. And I hope they get it. Probably not probable. Maybe it is. Who really knows? But I greatly appreciate everyone for tuning in. That will conclude this show. I think we got a lot done today for considering the news cycle's pretty slow. A couple big stories, but that's really it for the most part. I thank you all for tuning in. Please like, share, subscribe, drop the mic, let everybody know about the podcast. I've been, picking up a couple viewers here and there. It's kind of difficult. I had that LeBron video I put up on Rumble, and I got some pretty huge viewership. I think I'm around like 2,000 views on that one. That one hit, I guess pretty hard. Somewhere people really appreciated it. So, thank you for tuning in, and I will see you all on a Friday. Thank you.